Tension between India and Canada refuses to die down as India makes its stance clear. India has ordered 41 Canadian diplomats out of the country by the 10th of October, citing Canada's continued interference in India's internal affairs and insisted Canada have parity in numbers and seniority of diplomats in India. This comes amid Justin Trudeau's allegations of potential involvement of Indian agents in the killing of Khalistani separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Here's a report.
The Indian government's aggressive stance just 24 hours after Canada sought to dial down tensions following over 2 weeks of an escalating crisis.
Given the much higher diplomatic presence of Canadian diplomats or diplomatic presence here in Canada and their continuing interference in our internal affairs, we have sought parity in our respective diplomatic presence. Discussions are ongoing on the modalities of achieving this. Canadian diplomatic presence is very much higher. We would assume that there would be a reduction.
With that, India makes it clear that it is in no mood to soften up on crisis triggered by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on September 19th. Trudeau's public attempt to link India to the killing of Canadian Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar taking relations to an ever-worsening low over 17 days. What makes India's latest words especially strong is that they come 2 days after Canada, after 2 weeks of public attacks, sought private discussions with India.
There are tensions between both our government. More than ever, it's important that diplomats be on the ground. And that's why we believe in the importance of having a strong diplomatic footprint in India. That being said, we are in ongoing conversations with the Indian government and we will continue to do that.
What India has signaled that it won't be playing ball just yet. The fact is, following the tit-for-tat expulsion of diplomats on September 19th, hours after Trudeau's first attack in Canada's parliament, India's first public response was a call for parity in diplomatic strength, indicating that Canada had a far larger strength in India than the other way round. By reiterating that call, India shows that it won't be stepping back on that course of action. A recent Financial Times said that India had ordered 41 Canadian diplomats out of the country by October 10th. But by choosing to highlight Canada's continued interference in internal affairs of India, India settles all doubts that Canada does not get to set to flip the switch back to normalcy, just because its campaign has backfired.
We are looking at parity, we are looking at the fact that there have been interference and there has been a much higher number of Canadian diplomats here, and hence the discussions on achieving parity are ongoing.
It is also a sign that India sees the crisis as an opportunity to achieve something that has thus far been too delicate to push through, and the proverbial ball goes right back into Canada's court. Bureau Report.
All right, and this is massive embarrassment for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in his homeland. Trudeau was shamed by a man in Toronto when he was greeting his supporters. In a video that has gone viral, Trudeau was seen waving and shaking hands with a supporter where he was snubbed and abused incessantly by a local man. The man confronted Trudeau on issues like housing crisis and refused to shake hands with him. He blamed Trudeau for country's messed up housing crisis. Trudeau's confrontation with the man comes against the backdrop of a snowballing diplomatic row between India and Canada over Trudeau's allegations of India's involvement in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nijjar on Canadian soil. Our Foreign Affairs Director Geeta Mohan is back with us for more details on that. Geeta, this has essentially got to do with the problems, domestic problems snowballing in Canada that the locals have in fact been upset about, and that's the reason why this sort of a reaction. But this is embarrassing for the Canadian Prime Minister.
Well, disgruntled citizens we find in all countries. This is Canada, where a Canadian citizen heckled Prime Minister Trudeau, and it had to do with two aspects. One is the domestic economic policies, where he's questioning affordability, rise in inflation, and the fact that a common man in Canada cannot afford housing. And on the other hand, the fatigue that is set in with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war, where he's questioning funds that are being sent to Ukraine to fight the war against Russia, and whether if it's a viable option in an environment where the country faces economic crisis. So two aspects where people in Canada have started questioning, and it is a growing trend not just in Canada, but also in various parts of Europe, where citizens have started questioning sending aid and money funding the Ukraine war and funding Ukraine to fight Russia. So these are two aspects where Trudeau was questioned, and it just shows that there is increasingly the people of Canada now are disgruntled with the policies, and Prime Minister Trudeau's popularity rating has been dropping for some time now. So again, it would be an election year for him in a year's time, and we'll have to wait and see how he fares. But for now, it seems like his popularity in the country is coming down, not because of the crisis with India, particularly with his own domestic policies and his foreign policy decisions with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war.
Geeta, I'm going to ask you to be with us. In fact, let's take a look at once again at that video that has gone viral in which the Canadian Prime Minister was left embarrassed. All right, let's now talk about the crisis that India and Canada have been dealing with for days and weeks together. Now, what has India achieved as far as from the moment actually when the allegation was made, even before that? Well, India has achieved grounds to force parity in diplomatic strength. That's what India has achieved. Also, there's been global attention on Canada's pro-terror policies. Essentially, this was a problem that India was dealing with. Now there is global spotlight on this issue. Also, change to publicly flex against so-called personnel. That's what India has achieved again as far as this controversy between both the countries is concerned. Distance India further from third world pushover image. This image that many countries had, India has proven that it is not a pushover and it can't be just dealt with like the way the so-called first world wants to deal with us. Forced even Canada's treaty allies to avoid solidarity. There are many other countries, in fact, who at this point in time, otherwise allies of Canada, who could not show any solidarity with Canada, given its support for terrorist elements in the country. India's rise to high table of anti-terror diplomacy. India has put the focus on these issues in Canada, talking about how Canada essentially has been a safe haven for terror. Also a signal that India managed to send to the world that Khalistani leverage won't work. It's a lost cause in India, and this will not work even outside of India.